Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. This is Dave Emmons and The Strange Reality with Dave Emmons. That's me. And where I talk to guests of all different types of, genres, in research, investigations, or whatever, are people that have been through a lot of training and a lot of boots on the ground. And I enjoy talking to different people, different disciplines. And I have a person that's on now. She's been around quite a bit, and I'll read off her bio, and I'm going to bring her on right now. Lynn Monet, same as the painter.
Hi,
Hi, hi,
yes.
Lynn. Yeah,
Hi,
yeah,
thank you for having me, Dave. I really was looking forward on being on your show today. So
yeah.
thank you for inviting me.
And it sounds like we're both in a hurry and in a rush today. I was in a hurry and I was running a little late, and of course moving, and that's part of the whole thing about moving, talking to people and getting your I's dotted and T's crossed. So
Yeah.
Lynn Monet, she is an internationally recognized author, nurse, intuitive empath, certified death doula, MEM practitioner, speaker, and host of the Lynn Monet Show on Ground Zero Plus Radio, currently streaming on Gaia's Beyond Belief with George Norrie and WYFF Good Morning Augusta. Lynn has appeared as a guest on hundreds of podcasts worldwide, and I'm glad I have her here on this one because she's got one heck of a background and sharing her unique insights into spirituality, consciousness, paranormal phenomena, and life beyond the physical realm through her acclaimed books, media appearances, and speaking engagements. Lynn continues to inspire audiences with her extraordinary journey and profound perspective on the mysteries of human experience. That all sounds great, and I think a lot of people could use some of this knowledge that you have about spirituality and consciousness, and actually getting within peace within themselves. Uh, okay, Lynn Monet, tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and a little bit about yourself personally.
Well, I started out as a runway model for Halston. I paid my way through nursing school and was a nurse for 43 years. I am 63 years old. In May, I just turned 63. Had a late life baby at 46 that's now getting ready to go into college.
You don't
And
look 63.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I think it's the late life baby thing, and I recommend it,
Yeah,
people. It definitely
yeah.
it's definitely good for you. But I since have retired as a nurse. I did 17 years of nursing and end of life care, which was put me in the position where I was privy to some very beautiful things at the time of people's passing. And now I'm an international author. I originally I grew up in a haunted house. I was 3 short blocks behind a hospital, so it was commonplace for my siblings and I to see um, ghosts of people in patient gowns walking through our house. It was also next door to a nursing home, is what they called them back then. Now they're called skilled facilities. So I've always had this gift of second sight, and it has
Mhm.
helped. It has helped me in many ways in my profession to even see loved ones coming in to collect their people when they're transitioning. I've and other things too that aren't so great. But which direction would you like to go in?
Okay, Beyond Belief with George Norrie. A lot of people know that show and know George Norrie. Could you tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about what you talked about on those shows, Lynn?
I can. He wanted to talk about, and I love George. He's such a wonderful, wonderful man, and the whole Gaia team is absolutely amazing. It was a wonderful experience for me, and I hope to be going back again soon. He wanted to talk about the piece of property, a mix of things, because I am multifaceted in the sense that um, paranormal being a blanketed term has a dark side and a light side. And the dark
Right.
side, of course, is the woo scary stuff, the ghosts and the creatures that nobody wants to ever come in contact with, as well as the light side that has to do with angels and fairies and fae and elementals and those sorts of things. And in some cases, alien type things. I have had experiences with all of them. I have had near death experience. I have had purchased a haunted house that was haunted so bad that I never moved in, which is how the Omnipresent series started. The first book is an actual event that occurred in the house while my son was sitting on the master bathroom toilet. And fortunately, he was there. And then from there, I proceeded into writing a book about Colors of Heaven, Beginnings Never End, which is experiences that I had being a death doula. And by the way, people always ask, what is a death doula? It's like a death midwife. As there's a midwife that brings in babies, the death doula helps people transition out. And is the rock for the family and that sort of thing too. We help them make sure that their end of life directives are in place and all of those sorts of things, and help the family that way as well. So with
I'm
my
sure you've had some really interesting stories doing that procedure.
yes,
What are some of the really interesting stories that you found that you ran across, that you were dealing with somebody that was dying? Are there any real interesting stories, Lynn, that you work with?
many, 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 many. And some people have already heard, but I'm going to repeat them anyway because they are worth repeating. You know, in the medical field, being a medical professional, everything is about big pharma. So when people are getting ready to cross over and they start seeing their loved ones coming in and talking about it, the medical field claims that it's hallucinations, something to do with the oxygen. And on the flip side, also in the mental facilities, when people are talking about hearing voices and different things, a lot of people in mental facilities don't belong there. They are psychic or empaths. And I've seen examples of that as well. But back to people that are getting ready to pass, there were some, for instances, that I witnessed that there was no denying that there was not some form of afterlife and loved ones that come in. And that's something I would like to say is that when we pass, even if there's not a physical person in the room, nobody ever dies alone, because they have a whole group of loved ones from the other side that come to help them transition over. So if ever someone is suffering with guilt because they didn't make it there in time for mom's last breath, mom didn't go alone. She went with her family on the other side. Also, we don't die. If you want to go from a scientific method instead of a woo-woo method, energy can't be created or destroyed. It just
Right.
changes. And the problem is that our meat suits wear out. Our souls don't wear out. Our meat suits wear out. So we have to leave our bodies behind and then go on once our bodies are finished. Here. Also, I'd like to mention that there are three kinds of death. There's the near-death experience, sudden death, and natural death, which most of us have. Most people have the natural death. And on the other side, all three of them are handled differently. So just to get back to some of the examples of things that I experienced, and this one in particular, there's no way that a blind person can hallucinate. And I had a patient that was blind. She had been blind, totally blind for 10 years. And she was on my unit, and her son and daughter comes down to the nurse's station, and they say to me, Mom's talking to people in the room that aren't there.
Mm.
Well, I expected that because the loved ones do come in, and because when they're in that state of transitioning, their filters efface. So they can hear the telepathy coming in from the other side, which is how they communicate, as well as they can hear the people verbalizing in physical form. So to not so much to worry about her, but to comfort her family, I walked down the hallway with the son and daughter, and I said, let me walk down to your mama's room with you and just check on her, make sure she's comfortable, see if she needs anything. And when we walked in, she was laying at a slant with her oxygen on, and she was reaching up into the sky as if she was being handled something very, very delicate, because she was being very careful with it. And she was smiling. She was very happy with whatever she was being handed by whatever it was that was up in the air. And I
Mm.
said to her when I went in the room, I said, Edna, who's here? And she said, George. Well, her daughter just had turned as white as a sheet and had to sit down, because she said, well, George is my father, and my father passed away X amount of years ago. And then Edna pipes up and she says, and he's glad that you're taking good care of Pixie. Pixie was Edna's poodle. When George passed away, the son had to take possession of Pixie the poodle because, of course, Edna, being blind, couldn't care for the dog. I mean, she couldn't see shadows or sparkles or anything, nothing. It was just pitch black for her. So the son says to me, he says, "Do you think my mom's hallucinating?" And of course, in a medical setting, I can't say. And plus, I could see George standing on the other side of the bed, but I couldn't come out and say, no, I think your dad's here. Medically, I would have gotten in trouble for that. So I had to turn it around and I said, well, do you think that she's hallucinating? And he said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, it's been my experience. I said, I'm not trying to change your religious beliefs or anything. I said, but it's been my experience seeing hundreds of people pass that loved ones from the other side do come in and help collect their loved ones and help them to cross over. I said, do you mind if I try something? And he said, we go ahead. And I said to Edna, Edna, can I ask George a question? And she nodded her head, yes. And I said, what color is your son's shirt? And she said, yellow. He was wearing a yellow Ralph Lauren polo shirt. George had to tell her what color the shirt was because Edna, being totally blind, could not see what color it was. So as a medic, and of course at that moment too, I'm like, let me leave you here with your dad and your mom, because the dad, the son all of a sudden got it, and he's like, "Hi, Dad." And of course, the daughter was still sitting in the chair, looking like she was going to puke, because the whole thing was upsetting her a little bit. It was kind of scaring her. But so I mean, that really hit it home for me because a blind person cannot hallucinate. So the theory of these hallucinations are true. I have another example of that. I had a patient. If you'd like me to continue, I'll be happy to with that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm really interested in it because I was wanting to ask you a question about this lady. Could she have memorized her husband the way he looked from her memory, and instead of a hallucination, she's using her memory to recall what he looked like, Lynn?
Well, she didn't say that he was there. She I mean, she did say that it was George that was there, but I mean, I wasn't asking her what color the shirt was. I asked if I could ask George directly, but Edna could hear him through the telepathy. There's no way that she could have known that her son had a yellow shirt on if George had not told her, because nobody else told her what color it was. And yellow is not a common color for a man's, you know what I'm saying? So, so even if she had a memory of it, I mean, I believe that she knew that he was there. She probably could see him because it was through her spirit eyes, which in second sight is a form of spiritual eyes. It's not just the eyes that we see with, here. So
I guess what I was pushing at was the idea that she was seeing her husband, her dead husband, and she saw, of course, she was able to see him through her memory. And that's what I was talking about. Not so much the yellow shirt thing is a phenomena. It's really unique. But I was just talking about how she recognized her past husband. I guess that was through memory. But I guess, did she say she saw him and what he looked like? Did he look like the same person, Lynn?
I all that I asked her is who she was taught, who was here, and she said George. So she didn't specify what he looked like. I personally could see what he looked like. I could see his image looking there. The way that I see spirits are, is I can see them as clear as I can see you if they're in my peripheral vision. If they're in front of me, like a distance of about 10 feet or farther away, they look more opaque, similar to like if you're in the parking lot of a mall walking towards like a J.C. Penney with those big plate glass windows, and you see your own reflection in those plate glass windows, they appear like that to me at a distance, that kind of opaque looking thing. When I'm up close, there's a waffling to the air, energetic waffling to the air, kind of like gas fumes or hot vapors coming off of a paved road. That rippling energy, yes, that rippling energy, and that's how they appear to me. So I know that they're there. I had another patient called Edna. I call her Edna in my book. I loved her. Had this wonderful sense of humor, this vivacious woman, and she was an only child. Her husband was an only child, and they had come to the facility because his health was failing. So the place that I worked had the 3 levels of care. I was in the skilled unit, but they had gotten a house in the independent area so that nursing could come through daily and help her husband. But she just so happened to slip and fall and fracture her hip. So she was on my unit for a little while. And there was one day in particular that I went in to see her. And she said to me, she said, Lynn, she said, do you think I'm crazy? And I looked at her and I was teasing her. I didn't think she was serious. And I looked at her and I said, define crazy. And she said, no, I mean, like really, like crazy, crazy. And I
Yeah.
said, well, no, of course not. Why would you even say something like that? And she said, well, I see my parents and I know my parents had passed away a long time ago. She said, but I see them and it makes me happy. She said, and they're telling me that they're hallucinations and they're getting ready to put me on medication to take away my hallucinations. And I don't want to stop seeing my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, I said, well, as your advocate, I said, first of all, you have the right to refuse. I said, if you're alert and oriented, you have the right to refuse. I said, I'm not telling you to refuse. I'm telling you that you have the right to refuse. I personally, if you don't want the medication, I'm not going to force you to take it. Legally, I cannot. I said, and you're being discharged the next morning to go home. So she was happy with that. But about 6 months later, she was back on my unit. She was terminally ill. And I'm sorry, she was terminally ill. And she had been talking about seeing a young woman with a little girl coming to visit in her room. And it was so real to her that she was taking cookies and cakes from the dining room to her room to give to the little girl and the lady. And of course, we had to stop her from doing that because it was creating a bug problem. So we had to start checking her purse whenever she would leave the dining room to make sure she didn't have stowed away stuff to take to her room. I usually worked midnights, but I volunteered to work a day shift for a friend of mine. And all of the residents were back in their rooms after lunch, and I'm getting ready to go down the hallway with the treatment cart to, do treatments on people. And I passed by Abigail's room, and Abigail is sitting in a recliner right next to a big picture window, and she's sitting forward with a piece of butterscotch wrapped candy. And anybody else that would have walked by it would have looked like she was trying to feed the air conditioner. But I saw standing in front of her a woman with black hair parted down the middle. She had on a white peasant blouse, a denim skirt almost to her ankles. In front of her was standing a little girl with black hair, again, parted down the middle, bangs. She had on this blue puffy sleeved dress with a pinafore, little Mary Jane shoes, and fluffy, ruffly socks. And I passed. And then I thought, oh, wow, great. I just got some visitors, today because she didn't have children. And being an only child, she didn't have family to come in and visit her. But then when I stepped forward, it struck me that I don't remember seeing those 2 people sign in at the nurse's station. And legally, we have to have a head count of how many people are in the building so that if there's an emergency, the fire department knows how many people to get out. Mm-hmm. So I backed up and I knocked on the door frame and she invited me in, and I walked in and there was nothing there. But I could see the energetic waffling just right over here, real close to me there. So I knew the spirits were still there. And Edna says to me, she said, I'd like you to meet my friends. Isn't the little girl beautiful? And I said, yes, she is. Man, Edna just about came out of her chair. She flings forward and she says, can you see them? And I said, yes. And she said, don't tell anybody because they'll think you're crazy and put you on medication. So here, Edna was now being medicated for hallucinations. She was still seeing dead people and loved ones coming forward. So even the medication, because they weren't hallucinations, didn't take them away. And she had the wherewithal to know the difference. you
Mm.
know, and she passed shortly after that. And also that was a very touching experience for me because, I'll tell you this, it makes me cry though, but, I went into her room and she was kind of in that rallying stage. And I walked over and I kind of stroked the inside of her arm and I said, Edna, I'm here. It's, Lynn, I'm here to, not Edna, Abigail, I'm sorry. Edna was the blind lady. Abigail, I'm here to check your blood pressure. And she just lit up and she said, I am so glad that I get to see you one more time. My parents are coming to get me tomorrow and I'm going home.
Mm.
I knew what that meant because a lot of
Sure.
times people do know when they're going to pass. So I told her, I gave her a kiss on the cheek and I said, you precious lady. I said, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of your healthcare team. It's been such a pleasure. And she said to me, she said, I want to tell you something. She said, you need to keep doing what you're doing because you're very much loved on the other side. And of course, that makes me cry. And sure enough, she passed away at about 10 o'clock the next night. And I felt her. Like at around 10:30, she's like, I made it home, and sure enough, I called in the next day and she had passed at around 10 o'clock. But in addition to that, I have been privy to people passing, talking about babies that haven't been born yet. And if you'd like to hear about that, I'll be happy to share.
Sure, you can do that. When I asked you a general question, I know you've had some paranormal background. You've seen ghosts, and I usually ask people this question, especially people like yourself. You're an empath. You see ghosts, and do you see ghosts all the time, anywhere that you go, or and could you tell me what are ghosts? I ask people what ghosts are. Are they some kind of a spiritual entity? Or are they our souls? What are they, Lynn? And could you're an empath, so you see ghosts all the time? That's the first
I,
question.
I don't see them all of the time. I can see them sometimes when I want to. Sometimes they do pop in on me. But the difference is like if I see them in my peripheral vision, because like I can see them as solid as I see you. And if
Hmm.
I'm in a room full of people and I'm not sure which is which, I'll look at them directly. When I look at them directly, if they fade to that opaque being or that waffling of energy, then I know that it's a ghost. But the difference is that ghosts are souls that have been in a human body at one point. However, they have chosen at the time of death not to cross over. That is the difference. So they remain earthbound, which we can choose not to cross over if we don't want to. I have, for instance, of a story about that as well that I'd be happy to share with you.
Sure, go ahead and do that. But I've been hearing, stories about scientists and doctors are saying, okay, if you see the bright light, don't go to the bright light. Go the other direction, because if you go to the bright light, you'll be reincarnated. Uh, that's a theory that's out there, Lynn. I don't know if that you've heard that, but that's not true, right?
Go to the light. That is so, go to the light, go listen to your heart. Your
Yeah.
heart, they're finding out that your heart has more memory than your brain does. So, which is very important, that people start to realize that you need to drop into your heart and go with that. There was a question also that I don't listen to that. I don't listen to that. I do believe that people some are reincarnated, some are not. I believe that those of us like yourself and myself that are on the earth right now have volunteered to be here for some of the changes that are going to be occurring on the earth, the frequencies, the solar flares, some of the craziness that we see going on because the end will justify the means.
Hmm.
I do believe that. But there is life after death. My mother speaks to me a lot from the other side. I got to see her come out of her body at the time of her death, which is a very, very beautiful story in itself. But did you want me to mention first about the babies that hadn't been born
Yes,
yet?
yes.
Okay.
Before I
Okay.
rudely interrupted you on that,
No, no, no,
go
you're
ahead.
fine. You're fine. I had two incidences, and both of these women were older. One was like 50, and the other one was 45. I'll go with the 45-year-old first. I had a patient that was actively passing, and her niece, April, was in the room, and I'm in there tending the mother and not the mother, the aunt, and I'm overhearing the conversation. And she says, April, when are you going to have those two baby girls? I want to see those two baby girls before I go home to see Jesus. And April told her, she said, I don't know why you're seeing that. I've been trying for 25 years. I can't have children and I'm in menopause. And she said, it's a nice thought. And the patient insisted. She said, no, these are your girls. I can see you holding one in each arm and they have blonde ringlets, brown eyes, dimples, and they look like you. The lady passes. April had two other relatives, her uncle and her father, that came through my unit. One passed away there. One was there for a rehab after he had a knee replacement or something. So I saw her two more times. Once was about 6 months after her aunt had passed away, and she had a baby bump. And I walked over to her and I'm like, what you got in there? I had to ask. And she said, I have identical twin girls. She said, when my aunt passed away, I was so early pregnant that they wouldn't even have been able to have noted, it wouldn't even have shown up on a blood or urine test yet. So going forward, after she had the babies and they were about 18 months old, she'd come in to visit one of her relatives. And I see her going down the hallway, hand in hand with these toddling, two little 18-month-old girls with blonde curls just bouncing all over the place like Shirley Temple, but as white as sand. They had brown eyes, dimples, and they looked just like her.
Wow.
Yeah, no joke.
I imagine when you see these things, I know I've seen some things that really I was awestruck, shock and awe actually. And when you see these things, I guess it really still shocks you, even though you've probably seen many things happen like this. Each time you run into an incident like this, it has a lasting effect on you. I can tell, Lynn, by your feelings that you express, and I think that's great. Yeah,
it's comforting to me. It is comforting to me to know that there is more than just this life that we have here. The second person that I had, she was in the room. It was her mother, and her mother says to her, she says, "There's a little boy here calling me grandma." And the daughter speaks up and she says, "Well, I don't know why there'd be a little boy here calling you grandma. I'm an only child and I'm not married and I don't have a boyfriend and I'm almost at the end of menopause. I don't know why you'd have a little boy in here calling you grandma." And she said, "And he looks like you." She described him. Lo and behold, about 4 years later, I hear this voice coming up behind me. It's that lady, the daughter, and she's got this little brown-haired boy in the cart at Walmart, sitting in the cart. And I thought maybe she was babysitting, and she recognized me and she came over and I said, "How are you doing?" I said, "Who's this little fella?" And she said, "You're not going to believe it." I said, "Well, try me." She said that when her mom was passing away, she had gone to the break room just to get something to munch on and then to take back. And she met a man there whose wife had just passed away. And he was waiting for the family to come. And of course, they exchanged phone numbers and for several months, supported one another through their grief. And then he got up the courage to ask her out. And then shortly after, they got married. And then she thought she had mono and she went to the doctor and found out she was pregnant. Now, he already had several children of his own, but they were all daughters. So she told me that when she made the announcement to him about she put a little blue onesie and a year on it with booties and gave it to him to unwrap at the dinner table. And he says, "Who's having a baby?" She says, "We are." He says, "Oh, there goes the boat." But he was thrilled because he finally got a son. So that is another beautiful story. The one that I wanted to share with you when you were asking about the ghosts is that that is what a ghost is. Okay, a ghost is a spirit that has been embodied once before, but they choose not to cross over. The thing about spirits is whether they cross over or not, we keep all of our senses. So we can hear, so people never stop talking to your deceased loved ones. They can hear you. Okay. They also have ways to communicate back through leaving feathers and hairs and little things that you would recognize consistently. Right. So I'm in front of a patient's room that is actively passing, and I'm there to, give her some medication. And I see in the distance, there's this sitting area with pillars, and I see this ghost of this man that looked to be like 35 years old, kind of peeking around the post. And I said, hi. And he's like looking over his shoulder to see who I'm talking to. And I'm like, no, you there. I said, why haven't you crossed over? And he's looking at me, and he kind of comes over closer to my cart. He's a handsome man. He looked to be like in his 30s. He had clothes on from the 1800s. He looked to be like maybe upper middle class by the appearance of his clothes. You could see his cause of death was still showing, because when you don't cross over, the cause of death will still show. You still keep your mental illness, your addictive behaviors, anything like that, and the cause of death will show if you have not crossed over. So he had this Swiss cheese look to his abdomen, which indicated to me that his cause of death was something liver possibly related, cirrhosis of the liver or cancer, because that looks the same. And I said to him, I said, why haven't you crossed over? I can help you cross over if you want to. And he's like, and he spoke in this very heavy Irish brogue, and he says, "Me lady, I can't cross over." And I said, well, sure you can. I said, this lady over here's getting ready to pass, and her loved ones are coming in, and the ghosts will come around when they see the angels come in, just out of curiosity sometimes and temptation. And I said to him, you could hitch a ride. I said, I was teasing him a little bit. I said, but you don't really have to, but I can help you cross over. I said, you really need to consider this, because not many people can see you. And if they could see you, they'd probably run off screaming, wetting their pants. I said, so I can help you. And he said, "Me lady, I can't cross over." He said, "My mistress and my wife are on the other side, and neither one knew about the other."
Oh, really? So it
Yes.
gets into that kind of a drama on the other side.
So,
Wow. What happens
no,
to these spirits? Do they walk around forever, ever on Earth, Lynn?
they have the same as we have freedom of choice here. They also have freedom of choice. Some of them, in the cases of mental illness and things like that, they will kind of be absorbed at some point, but it takes a long time. But and plus two, and when they're in that fourth dimensional realm where they're basically on Earth but with no body, I mean, they see some other really nasty stuff too, because that's where all of the portals and the interdimensional travel is done by multiple different kinds of entities, being Bigfoot, being aliens, being
Yeah.
demons. I mean, they all use those for portals. And a lot of times too is when the ghosts are wandering, they kind of like staying in one place because if it's a safe place for them, or unless they have an addiction, then they like being in a house with somebody else that has the same addiction. Because if somebody, liked gambling, they'll like looking over the shoulder of somebody who's gambling, or if somebody's smoking, they want to be near to get the essence of the cigarette. And, people argue that how can people smell once they're out of their body, because they don't have an olfactory nerve, but it's memory recall. So, like, for instance, if you were to think about walking into a movie theater right now and the smell of the popcorn in that movie theater, which they always smell like popcorn, you can smell it,
Mhm.
So it's the same thing. It's a memory recall that they have, but they will linger here to, I've seen dead, if people could see what I see and see all of the dead people standing around people having drinks in a bar, they would run out of there screaming. I mean, I've even seen a guy with his head holding his head up to the bar before. So, a lot of times addiction will anchor them here. It doesn't have to, but a lot of times it will. So it's important that people kind of, try to come away from that before they pass. But
So
yeah.
if we're able to have, like, say, infrared vision or something, we could see these ghosts around us. What kind of vision would it take besides being an empath and being talented like you are, and you're able to see these spirits? Can scientifically, can we see them with technology or something, Lynn?
Some of the technology that they have come out with, such as infrared, you can see. I've seen demons on infrared. They also now have these things that line up like stick people,
Yeah.
and they match in with the energy, because these ghosts and entities, for lack of a better word, are energy fields. So they have things that will now connect in with the energy fields that you can actually see. You know, you may not be able to see details like what color their hair is, but you can definitely see their stature, if they're hunched over, you know, if they're walking around and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So,
Okay,
yes,
one question before we go to your books here. I know you've written 5 books, I believe, right? And we'll tell people how they can
yes,
get hold of those. Yeah, and I've
five,
got 2 books that we're going to cover. Yeah.
yeah,
One
five.
last question before we go to that, Lynn.
Mhm,
Other
mhm,
medical people have said they've seen things in hospitals too, like nurses, doctors have admitted seeing strange things, their bodies, things lifting from the
mhm.
body. Uh, do you know a lot of people in your profession that you've met that has actually witnessed things that you have, Lynn?
Yes, I have a friend of mine named Janet. We work together, and even hospice nurses will tell you that they see a lot of things as well. You know, some I people make the mistake of thinking that the soul leaves the body at the last minute, at the last breath, but many times the soul will leave even a day before or an hour before, and then the physical body is just left there to finish, and you can kind of tell the difference because the life just kind of leaves them and it's just the body finishing out. I
Is it the eyes that are the indicators? They just turn black. Is that what one of the indicators the soul is left, Lynn?
they usually they don't turn black. They get kind of a glazed look over and they might be half masked, but that doesn't mean the soul is gone necessarily. My mother chose to stay in until the last minute, even though she could no longer verbalize and she had that half masked glazed over look to her eyes. But I know that she didn't leave until the last minute because when people would continue to come into the room and they'd say, "Hi, Phyllis," she would mouth and her eyebrows
Mhm.
would go up and down, and it was appropriate. In the
Mhm.
same token, when the loved ones from the other side started to come in, such as her mother and my sister who had been murdered, came in to my I'm sitting on one side of my mother's bed. I see the ectoplasmic wall thickening. I can see movement over there. And yes, everybody, they do show up in clothes. Nobody wants to see mom naked, at your deathbed. So, you'd be like, "Mom, get some clothes on," it would be too
Yeah.
weird. Except for the one ghost that was in one of the books that I wrote. He was naked. That's the only time I've ever seen a naked ghost, but he was a pervert. So anyway, in
Yeah.
the case of my mom, when my grandmother, my mother's mother, came in and started stroking my mother's arm, she leaned forward and said something into my mother's ear, and my mother had the same response with the eyebrows and the mouthing because she could hear the telepathy, and that she did that 3 times. And I finally had to tell my mom after my sister came into the room, my grandmother came into the room, the whole wall had effaced. I could see into the other side. There are colors over there that we would need 10 more color wheels to even imagine. There are the light, there is no light source. It seems to illuminate from within the atmosphere itself, if that makes sense. And
Mhm.
the love and the elation that comes from the side, there are no human words to describe it, and there's no feeling that can touch it. It just is something that you recognize that you have been missing, that you didn't know you were missing until you get to engage with it. So when my mother finally, I'm watching, and I'm going forward quickly, but I'm watching them huddle next to her bed like a football huddle. And I'm like, what's going on? When they opened up, my mother's spirit was standing in the center. But prior to that, I told her, I said, "Mom," I said, "Robin and Grandma are here to take you home. It's time for you to go home. I will be okay." I gave her a kiss and I said, "It's time to go." And she did the mouthing thing in response. And 10 minutes later, she took her last breath. And I'm seeing her standing and I'm smiling. And I remember looking over and seeing that she was no longer breathing. And I remember thinking to myself, "Oh my God, I better call the nurse because I'm sitting here smiling." You can't help but smile when you're in the presence of that beauty, because I didn't want them to think that I did something to my mother, because that's not a normal response. That your mother's just passed away and you're sitting there grinning ear to ear, because you can see her standing right there and how happy she is.
Mhm.
So yeah, so anyway, there were some other things that also happened with that kind of brings the aliens, for lack of another word. I'm not talking about the little green people running around. I'm talking about the beautiful ones, that kind of brings the aliens together with the angels. And when my mother, the room started to thin out of people. I mean, some of the people I recognized. My cousin that had been in a car accident was there, that had died. Some aunts and uncles that I recognized, that I knew in this lifetime, that had passed away, were there also. And the room kind of started to thin out. And as they started to walk out past me, there were these beautiful angels that walked with my mother, my sister, and my grandmother to assist my mother over. But there were these other beings that appeared to be from somewhere else that were also connected with the angels in some way. And really, if you think about it, with all of the stars in the sky that are sunshines for solar systems, it would be ignorant to think that we're the only ones. And and
Right.
even if you want to go from a biblical sense, they need to have a church that teaches about all of the books that were taken out of the Bible,
Yes,
that talk
you're
about,
right.
yeah,
You're
that talk
correct.
about dinosaurs and aliens and all of those sorts of things,
Mhm.
that were taken out. So they do, they do exist. And the thing is if when those beings finish out their lifetime, wherever they're out, they have to have a place to go to. So, and I'm
Mhm.
not talking about the weird cryptid stuff like that. They kind of go more into a different dimension, but,
Are you talking
different
about
kind of
like
thing.
extraterrestrials like Pleiadians and the tall whites
Yeah.
that usually
Nordics.
Nordic?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I'm talking about those. Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
So,
Lynn.
and the thing is too, is what people, funny thing is my mom she'll come through every once in a while like a megaphone, and everybody always asks about, well, they're going to miss eating food, like their favorite ice cream or cookies, oh, I'm going to miss those cookies when I pass away. And my mom, I asked her one time, I said, Mom, do you ever miss the taste of potato salad or the barbecued ribs or brownies that you used to make? And she's like, well, we don't eat here. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, I know you don't eat there. She said, but we do everything by thought. So if we want to be in a particular place, we think of it and we're instantly there. They can
Mm.
also be 6 places at one time. So they can be at the dining room table eating breakfast with you while they're driving to the car to work with your sister in the car, if you have one. You know what I'm saying? So they can be multiple places at one time, which I thought was interesting. She said, but when we think about food, she said, because we have the ability to manifest it, it comes to us, the flavor and sensation of eating it comes to us as if we are eating it. And I thought that was amazing. I'm like, I wish they could do that with Ben and Jerry's right now, because, I'll be eating my
You,
Ben and
you,
Jerry's on
you,
the other side.
yeah, you said use the word manifesting, and I think that's happens here on Earth too. I got
Yes,
one, like I said earlier, I had a question to ask, but
I'm
one
sorry.
last question. Since you're a medical profession, and since you're a spiritual person, and you've seen ghosts, and you're an empath, a question is, should a person be cremated or should they be buried, Lynn?
It doesn't matter. It's whatever the preference is, because you've got to realize something. They're not hurting the soul. The
Hmm.
soul's no longer in the body.
Right.
So for them to cremate it or to bury it is a personal preference of whatever the family needs for their own closure, because really the funeral and all of that is for the family. It's not for the deceased, the person that's been, that has crossed over,
Hmm.
because trust me, they're having a wonderful time where they're at, and they
Yeah.
might even be standing there. And I've even told my children, I'm like, look, do whatever you need to do with me that's the cheapest. Keep the money. I do not want a funeral. Just put a little blurb in the paper or at the funeral home about me. Keep the money and take me to the ocean where I grew up and just put me in there.
Oh,
So, because, I mean, I don't want all of these sad, grieving people crying for me when I'm so happy. You know what I'm saying? And kind of anchoring me here. So
oh.
that is my preference. I just want to be gone,
Yeah.
type thing.
I did a little research on a book that I wrote, Angels and Supernatural Entities, and I found that it was mentioned by Christ that he said that the soul sticks around about 3 days and then it leaves.
Mhm.
But you're saying that sometimes the soul actually leaves before the body dies. Is that right, Lynn?
leaves the physical body beforehand, but yet they're still on the physical plane and back and forth. So it's not
Okay.
that they're completely gone, if that makes sense. I mean, they leave the physical body. I remember when my older sister, who recently passed away, and in a family of 6, I'm the only one left. Um, she literally flipped backwards out of her body and met up with my brother, who was at the
Wow.
head of her bed, who had also passed away several years before. So my mother left, and she, they stabilized her spiritual feet. I've seen some people whirl up. I've seen some people levitate. I've seen some people just simply walk out. You know, um, I even saw one of them do a cartwheel one time. I don't think that it was intentional, but that's what they did. But
Mm.
it's not that they're walking around on the earth per se like ghosts. It's that they're still in that realm of their families, because mostly because the families are kind of holding them here because they need, they're grieving the loss.
Right. I
So
brought your I brought your book, Colors of Heaven, and I've got the cover showing there, and that's why we're in smaller blocks now. This thing called life is but a blink of an eye, unaware of the wonders that lie ahead. Everyone is for the greatest surprise they could ever. They're in for a great surprise that they could ever imagine. The best is definitely yet to come. Just what you're saying. There are no words to describe the feeling that can touch it. It's just is. This story is about dying, death, and the inner workings of how many call heaven and home. It doesn't really matter how it happens. What matters most is that it does. Join Lynn as she navigates through the veils of the inner dimensions. And that's what you've been talking about. This is the book, one of the books. It's this 2023 book, right?
yes, yes, hmm,
Yeah. Yeah. And
yes.
you've been, that's what some of the stories that you've been talking about. This is what's in that book right there.
Yeah, so there's a lot of spoiler alerts. So, but there's still some other beautiful things. It talks about patients with Alzheimer's, and the thing is too, it talks about the difference and suicide. It talks about that. And also,
Mm-hmm.
people, I've had people even ask me questions about murder. They've asked me questions about abortion, about different things like that. And, you know, my mom has mentioned too, she's like, well, those things happen, but they haven't injured the soul. The soul is immortal. They cannot kill it. They can take away the body, but they can't take away the soul. And sometimes, if you, not that I'm recommending for people to go out and, do those sorts of things, but I'm just saying for those who, have ever questioned, because is some karma involved with some of those things. And not only that, you have to understand that when somebody comes to this earth, let's just say as an abusive parent, nobody wants to be the bad guy. They actually have to volunteer to come in as that parent in order to help someone else meet the goals that they need to meet, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
karma or growth in some way. And I know that, some of the things are terrible, but we can't possibly understand how that all plays out until we actually get on the other side. I'm not trying to make something terrible sound good, because it still is very, very awful to experience in this lifetime, especially, you know, um, when the family member is suffering the loss or the person having the act done to them. But you don't know all of the dynamics in it. And sometimes, these people, they volunteer to
Mm-hmm.
come in and do that. And again, you kind of have to commend them in a way, because nobody wants to have to come in and do that.
Yeah.
So,
And being a medical profession also, you you you've seen these people pass away, and
mhm,
what takes place, I've heard this old saying that there's no pain at death. The pain is only while you're living. Is that true,
yes,
Lynn?
that is true. There is no pain at death, but there is pain right beforehand if
Yeah.
you are suffering from something.
Yeah.
And then again, sometimes not, depending on what it is. Um, no, it's it's hard to explain it. It's like all of a sudden you're in the body and then the body's just gone, but you're still not dead. You're like, oh, okay. Well, that's kind of how that works. So understanding that we don't die is important, for people to hopefully bring them comfort and less, suffering and grieving when they lose one. I mean, you will see your loved ones again. You'll see your pets again too. So, if people can think of it that way and understand that it's not a death. I had a lady one time, she was about 94 years old, and she was worried because she said, when I die, she said, I lost my husband and he was in a car accident when he was in his early 30s or something like that. And she said, I'm afraid that when I cross over that he will be disgusted by the way that I look because I've aged so much. And I explained to her that he has been with her on her aging journey. He's aware of but he's not looking at her physical body. He's looking at her soul, which is still the beauty that she was, that he remembers.
Yeah.
So not to worry about being rejected, by him that way. So, people have a lot of questions that way too. So
Let me bring up this other book that I think you've done here. This is 2025, I believe, Becca Dawn Drive, and it's an experience beyond imagination, an unseen evil lurking within and around a quiet townhouse complex, 10 side-by-side units, each haunted by the inside. Is it the building's exuding negative energy that draws the spirits in, or the people, or is it the people? Maybe explain this book and why you were writing this, and now we're getting into the negative side of things. I know you've been talking about the positive side of dying and angels and heaven and things of that nature, but now you're into this evil part of our negative part. Lynn, could you explain this book and why you wrote it?
yes, I had, being a single mother, I was looking for a place to move to, and it just so happened that I moved into that townhouse. One thing I have to say is, because previously I had purchased a townhouse that I purchased a haunted house that I never moved into. It was haunted that bad. So everybody says, well, how did you end up having to go through this a second time? And the thing is if you're an empath, don't ever purchase something or rent something based on the virtual tour, because you got to go in with your feels on. And it just so happened that even the cleaning lady that wasn't cleaning the apartment before I moved in called me and told me that the building was haunted, but it was too late that I had already signed on the lease. So there was a ghost that I have pictures of that I took with my own camera, that I saw with my own eyes first. He's the only naked ghost I've ever seen. He was one of several, but he in particularly was going from townhouse to townhouse, pulling down women's underwear and crawling in bed with them in the middle of the night.
Wow.
So I wrote the book after connecting with 7 of the other tenants about the issue, and all of them were experiencing similar things. So I went ahead and I wrote the book, talking about that, because even with that being in that setting, the thing is if when you people call me sometimes and they're like, I've got demons in my house, and 99.9% of the time it's not demons. It's usually a lost soul or something. But so when I go in, I can help clear their house. But when they have like an apartment or something like that, where their house is connected to another house on either side or upstairs or downstairs, when I go in to clear those homes, these spirits just exit to the other apartment, twiddle their thumbs while I'm clearing the house, and then they come right back. After I've left, like a day or two later, and the sage and the effects of the neutralizing of the energy has died down. So I learned in that book how to create a force field in your house after you have cleared it and you're living in one of those settings where your walls touch someone else's house, because you have no control over what somebody else is doing in their house. They could be doing things to draw, things like that in, and then you're adversely affected. So you have to create an energetic force field in your home that is connected to someone else's home, in order to make sure that those things don't bother you.
Right. I know, since I'm an extraterrestrial experiencer, I've seen an other side. I've seen other life forms. I've seen the other side, and we know there's more to life than just us, like you were saying. And I think, have you ever experienced an ET visitation, Lynn? You
I
have?
actually had a patient that I think was a hybrid. I had a
Wow.
patient on my unit. She was at the end of the hall and I loved her. I mean, she had a great sense of humor, but she had big eyes like a wild-eyed rabbit all of the time. And when I went down the hallway at about 10 o'clock every night to take her pain pill, sleeping pill, take her cardiac meds in. I would take my blood pressure cuff in. And on several occasions in that room only and with that patient only, and when she passed away, I never saw them come back again. There were extraterrestrials that would come and stand at the back of her bed because the way that she had her bed laying, she was facing the door. And then there was an area to her back that was open because there was a dresser there. They would stand on the opposite side, literally pulling things out and replugging things in, like one of those old time telephone operators with the pegs that would take them out and plug in.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? It looked like they were doing that where they would unplug something and replug it someplace else. I saw them on multiple occasions. They were all the same size the first time. There were three of them, and they had something over their face so that I couldn't see it, but they were kind of squared off at the top. It kind of looked like they were maybe being manipulated or something from somewhere else. They were between this ectoplasmic sheer veil, so to speak, and they didn't think
Hmm.
that I could see them, but I could. And the thing was is that my blood pressure cuff died, battery gone, my phone battery gone. So finally, whenever I would go into her room, I would make a point to carry in a manual blood pressure cuff because this seemed to be a problem whenever the entities would come. I pretended like I didn't see them, but there was one time when there were five of them in the room. Four of them were the exact same size. The fifth one was taller than the rest, but had the same kind of uniform on. And while I'm standing at the side of the bed taking her blood pressure, the tall one comes around and literally walks right through me. Talk about an energetic burning feeling, even in my teeth. It was the strangest
Hmm.
feeling. I can't
Oh.
even describe the. And I remember saying, I mean, just automatically, if somebody bumps into you, say, "Oh, excuse me," without even thinking. And I said, "Oh, excuse me." And my patient thought that I was talking to her. And she said, "Oh, no." She said, "You didn't bump me or anything." And I wasn't going to say, "No, your friend just walked through me." You know, I've also seen a reptilian. I went to a place to donate plasma, and they couldn't find my veins. And you know what? I would fight God for my children. I don't know what parent wouldn't, but I swear on my children's lives, I
You
am.
said a key word there. We have this. Uh,
What's that?
yeah. You kind of blanked out there. We had a little interference as soon as you said reptilian.
Yeah, I'm not surprised
That's
about that.
strange. We blanked out.
Well, no, it's not strange.
Yeah.
They actually do
Now
that on
let's.
purpose. But when I was getting
Yeah.
the needle put into my arm, this young man, his face peeled from his ear to his nose, and his eyes slanted, and I could see the scales underneath his face. And I gasped. I'm like,
Mm.
"Oh." And he turned and he looked at me, and immediately the skin reapproximated, and he had this smile. He knew that I saw him. Man, I never went back. Because I'm like, those things are going to be drinking my plasma back there. There's no way
Yeah.
I'm coming back here. You know,
Right.
I mean, in my opinion, that's
Now
what they were going to be doing. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
a couple of. Okay, we're getting some there again, and we're talking about the wrong topic, I guess. But that hybrid girl, I always thought that they come down and picked them up and took them back to another planet or another parallel, another dimension or whatever. They didn't die like we die. Or was she buried like a typical human being, Lynn?
Again, because they have to use meat suits to be here, sometimes they do just vanish and disappear, but there are other times that they do shed it and go on as their etherical being, type
Mhm.
thing, which is what her case was. So I wasn't there when she passed away. I'm not sure whether she was buried or cremated. I know
Mhm.
that there was a body left, because it would have been, the news would have been in there. But sometimes they leave things so that it's subtle enough that it's not going to alarm people to the fact of what they were or what they were doing here.
Right.
But yes, they can just go off and fade away and walk into the portals and disappear. But there are other times when they've mingled enough with us, or like, for instance, if they have children, because they do, some of them can have children. They'll get with, somebody here and have children, and
Mhm.
everybody's going to wonder what happened to the body if they don't leave it behind. you
Right.
know
Yeah.
Everybody, when you've got that many people, family members, friends that have spent their life with you, not realizing that that is what you were. I mean, some of them will come in for a couple of days or weeks or something like that, or they'll trade places with somebody and take over a body, and the human soul is exits. So they take over and then they exchange again. So there's a lot of dynamic to it. But when there is a physical body involved, a lot of times, yeah, we'll be left behind like we leave ours behind.
Okay, one last question. We're up on an hour now, just about you talked about this bad guy that was nude or whatever, and you talk about the negativities, the negative energy in this other book in 2025 there. Where do these negative people or bad people go? Is there a heaven and hell, Lynn?
Yes. And the reason why I say yes to the hell part is because I've seen a hell dog up close and personal twice in my
Mhm.
lifetime. Personally, the reptilians are worse, but I've seen I've seen what comes from there. I've experienced what comes from there, so I know that that exists. And I've also seen what comes from the heavenly realms, or the other interdimensions, or the other side, or whatever you want to call it. I've seen those as well. So I've seen both, and they both have to come from somewhere. So I believe that hell is living on this earth.
Yeah.
This
Mhm.
in itself is hell, and um, but there are other darker forces that do influence people. They
Mhm.
also kind of kidnap souls that, don't choose to cross over, to keep them here for their entertainment. The reason why they need to do that is because when people are in a state of negative emotion, they emit an energy that's called loosh, and it's their
Yeah.
chocolate. They have to have it in order to be able to materialize, to be able to do more physical acts. Because in some of these, and it's usually more of a reptilian thing, because they're away from where their normal base is, they have to feed off of the energy. So they keep, I mean, think about movie theaters. People are in there watching a scary movie. They don't realize how many of those things are hovering over, having an eating frenzy,
Yeah.
you know, over the people that are having that seat click there, that white knuckle, and sitting on the edge of the seat syndrome type thing. So
What does it
I
make?
mean,
What does it make a person feel like when they're draining the loose energy from you? Do you ache? Do you get sick? Do they do that to people, Lynn?
it makes you very, very tired, for
Tired,
one thing. And it can make you sick, yes, and it can disturb your sleep. And when it disturbs your sleep, of course, you don't get good sleep. Then a whole
right?
array of medical things then take place. I know myself, when I go into clear homes, for that matter, I have to bubble up, and I have to bubble up because they don't want me there, and I'm constantly under attack. So I'm having to maintain my energetic field, not out of fear, but just out of protection. And even that in itself is so exhausting that I could go home and it's a paranormal jet lag kind of thing, or paranormal lag, whatever somebody said recently, that I could literally go home and sleep for 12 hours straight, 17 hours straight, and only get up to go to the bathroom and get a drink of water,
Mm,
because I'm that tired that I can't even function to go to work, if I had work the next day.
yeah.
So, and people don't realize, that when you call somebody, that they're coming in there, what a huge thing they're doing for you. But people also don't realize that before they call, they need to clean up their act. Because even if I were to come to someone's house and get the oogie boogies out for them, if their house isn't clean, if they're still continuing their porn addiction, or their, whatever else it is that they're doing, it'll roll out the red carpet to bring those things right back in. And they will come back in because they're creatures of habit. They like being in an atmosphere with people where they have a good thing going, and they don't like to change that.
Hmm.
So, people don't realize that too.
Yeah. We're living in a world of chaos, and people are depressed, and they have all these disorders and emotional disorders. And what could you tell people what your thoughts are about this worldwide phenomena. And secondly, in closing, tell us where we can get a hold of your books and your information, Lynn.
Okay, what I would like to say is those people with depression and those sorts of things, there is help. Currently, I'm going through a class called the Mace Energy Method, which is a no talk therapy. So you don't have to come in and rehash and spill your guts about all of the things that happened to you, like who did it to you, when it happened, all of those sorts of things, because those are not important in the sense that it's not about the event or who did it. It's about the feeling that you had when it happened to you. That
Mm-hmm.
in our etheric field, those things get stuck in our field, and we go through our lives reacting instead of responding. So what this does is it literally, for lack of a better word, it removes the buttons, or the goat for that matter. So, oh, she really knows how to get my goat, or he really knows how to push my buttons. It takes those away so that people can't push your buttons or get your goat, so to speak, anymore. And then you react more so than respond.
Mm-hmm.
So there is hope with that. But a lot of a whole nother show we could do on mental illness.
Oh, I'd
Um,
love to do another show with you. You've been fascinating, to tell you the
thank
truth.
you. Thank
Life
you.
and death issues, and a lot of people they worry about death, and they also are concerned about death. And you're explaining things so well. It's even comforting me to hear what you're saying, and you say it
I'm glad.
so sincerely that you're very believable in everything you're saying. And I'm sure people are going to really enjoy listening to this. And could you tell us where we can get a hold of your information, Lynn?
Absolutely. I have a website at www.lynnmonet.com. You can purchase my books there. My books are also on Amazon, but it's nice when you purchase them from me so I can sign them for you. Also, I am the radio host for the Lynn Monet Show on Ground Zero Plus on Sunday and Thursday during prime time. You can also reach out there and you can click on my host page. I have a Facebook page, which is Lynn Monet. Also, that you can definitely join up and subscribe and keep up with things that I'm doing, events that I've got coming up, speaking engagements, different things that you can come and meet me in
Mhm.
person, but also to reach out. And I'm just going to say this, I don't do demons anymore, people. I can
Okay.
do demons. I only do them for friends and family, but it's not worth the energy and the time to do them, and the repercussions that I have for years afterwards is working,
Yeah.
removing one of those. So
The
I only
attach
do,
the att- your attachments we're talking about. They get it. They attach to you, right? That
well, not me, but they will, they can create havoc. So and that's another thing too, when we get on the subject of mental illness and about addiction and about that there are archonic type attachments on people with addiction. They fit on their backs like neat little backpacks. They look like crabs. They look like spiders or reptilian, sometimes with a human buttocks or a tail
Mhm.
that curls off to the side. People with other issues like schizophrenia, a lot of times they have lost souls literally attaching over their shoulders and in their back, talking in their ear, not voices in their head, but they're actually whispering in their ears.
Mm.
And that's a whole nother show. I
Yeah,
can do a whole
that
nother show in
sounds
that.
yeah. This has been fantastic. Lynn Monet, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you
And
for having me.
I'll send you links to the show after I post it. And I
Okay.
usually post to about 11 different platforms. But yes, I enjoyed the conversation, Lynn, and it's been great having you here on the Strange Reality with Dave Emmons. And Lynn Monet, thank you very much. And good night to you, and good night to everybody. And thanks again so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you for having me.